Hello and welcome back to the Proving Grounds. We are on Game 4, gentlemen, and let me tell you, I wasn't expecting that Game 3 to go the way it did.
That was brutal. Especially if you're a Dignitas fan and seeing that one, I'm pretty sure you got a little bit of flashbacks of the classic Dignitas. But before we get into that, we got to really break into how this game started to fall apart, because right from the get-go, it felt like Dignitas were just pushing on stuff they really couldn't get across.
I think that's the biggest theme of it here, Destrux. Like, it's just every single time, like, it seemed as though the Dig had a plan in mind. Like, they knew what they wanted, but it came down to, in my opinion, just execution. Like, what you went for and what you got were two completely different outcomes. If you're thinking 1 + 1 is supposed to equal 2, Dig, unfortunately, by the end of the equation, had it equal 3.
I mean, that math works out for me, but I really got to think about how Dignitas, except for that Alistar dive, looked like they were ahead in the solo lanes. I mean, you saw how well Gnar was doing, you saw how well Saligo on the Azir was doing. It felt like Dignitas had all the cards held.
Yeah, I liked the way the solo laning went. Lorlo did style upon Viper, but that's the way that matchup is supposed to go when you do have the Gnar versus the Camille. The thing is, we talked about it before, you have to stop Viper. That is the big thing. It's not about just winning the lane. Viper wasn't stopped. He was able to get into the side lanes, and even when they focused Viper in the side lanes, guess who else is in the opposite side lane? You have Pretty. So the attention was always torn from one end of the rift to the other for Dignitas.
And these kind of like split casualties that just kept happening, I find only allowed for Immortals to just get back into the game in one way or another, right? They kept themselves competitive, even past like being down like at a point like maybe 2,000-3,000 gold. And like you were mentioning, bro, I do want to give an absolute massive shout out to just how well Lorlo played. His Nard, there's a reason why it's consistently banned away from him. Such a monster on this, like he's so gosh darn good. It impresses me every single time, man. And if I am to also like look on the other end too, it's like, yo, Viper on the back end of that, man, bro. But like small micro plays in the matchup to just make sure that he's just trying to stay alive. So like, I think when it comes down to the top of the matchup, I'm genuinely impressed. And Josh is talking about it, man. It's like surviving by the end of it here, Destructs. But playing on an inch, but getting back a dime here for Immortals. I'm confused, distraught, yet interested as to how things will be going forward.
Yeah, I do want to stick a little bit on that top lane note, because just to show you how far ahead Lorlo was really was in that early game laning, 40 plus creeps 12 minutes in ahead of Viper. He punished Viper in that lane. Viper really had no agency whatsoever in the early game, but as we said, it's the side lane control and the fact that Dignitas just didn't look like they were on the same page. They fought towards Immortals' win condition. Immortals wanted to scrap the fights. They wanted Dignitas to be torn apart, to fight them from one end to the other, to have Pretty doing janitorial duty on one end, to have Camille over with Viper just jumping on the carries that they can find. A lot of those all put together work so well into the wheelhouse of Immortals, and Dignitas just played straight for it.
And one big thing on that too is that Dig, as well, you saw, like especially on the side of Will had one clear game plan in mind. Will went in to kill Anda, and he did that every time. Like
And they had the same game plan, by the way.
Yeah, he just got him. Like it was flawless execution based on that front. But when you got past it, it's like you saw like, and the Will turns around thinking, okay, cool guys, I did my job. How are things? Oh, I see. And then suddenly he dies afterwards. Like things just unfortunately are not what they seem. And like, especially when he turns around past getting down the jungle. I'm really curious as to how Dignitas like move forward after this game, right? Because like things were clear, but then when you get that neutral objectives, when you get the infamous Dig Baron, and things progressively go Immortals' favor. But like I feel like it was right there for both these teams. Like it was there, man. It was there.
It really did feel like so close for so long in that game. The Baron happened, but we were talking during the game. There was a point at which both teams were in mid. They weren't looking for plays. They were both like timidly going around each other, trying to disengage because they didn't have enough information. What do you think causes that?
Well, stuff like that is just, it's really trying to allocate your resources and figure out what you have available for the next fight. I know the exact moment you're talking about, and it's because we saw stuff get burnt from Dignitas' side as well as Immortals' side. Ragnarok was one of them. Over on Dignitas' side, I believe they burnt the Crescent Guard and I believe it's called Unchained, the Alistair ultimate.
Unbreakable.
When you don't have those, Unbreakable, thank you. When you don't have those, you don't want to take the fight, and you're not really thinking about what the enemy team has. You're just thinking about what you have at that exact moment, and you're saying, no, let's not go for this. Both teams thinking the same thing as they misutilize resources. Ultimately, Dignitas misutilized them a little bit more.
Unchained was what happens when Varus actually lets go of his ultimate. Thank you.
Smart.
Yeah. Look, you get it, whatever, right? But the main point being, though, it's like, but speaking on that too, it's like Varus is actually, I thought one champion I found wasn't able to be a factor in this game at all. Considering how split apart just all these entire fights became, Varus couldn't get off a lot of damage besides maybe 1 or 2 blighted arrows. Change of Corruption maybe didn't land half the time, and then you're thinking, okay, what happens next? Because meanwhile on the other end, Keith. Bro, you talked about him feasting game number 2. Game number 3, he was doing the exact same thing. He's becoming a real factor in these games because Dig just cannot get to him. They can't do anything to him. And then suddenly, when you have Aphelios who's beastly strong, tearing apart your entire team members, you think, well, where do we go now?
I mean, that sums it up so well when you look at how both the matchup in the bot lane when it comes to Spawn and Keith. What I do see is him taking the Varus and trying to get in some of those damage. There's one time where the Aphelios got locked down because Lorlo was able to get a good Gnar ultimate. Aphelios not moving for 3 auto attacks that Spawn is able to get off completely uncontested. Keith still attacks back and just cleans up Spawn. That's the kind of nature of taking this lethality champion and trying to go into these auto attack fights, because that's what you see often. You see that Dignitas are trying to force Immortals into a fight. The Baron throw that we saw, Mega Gnar was available for Lorlo there. They wanted Immortals to walk into that one, but they get so split, they can't get the damage they need to. Varus needs to get a good amount of poke damage before you're able to find an engage for that type of composition. So when they do get that engage, they just don't have the consistent DPS to follow up.
Speaking of the consistent DPS here, though, I find that's one change that needs to happen for Dig. It was that when you're going into building your compositions, who is going to be that main carry on your backline that can make sure that no matter where you are in a fight, you're going to be perfectly fine. We know that Azure is definitely an option, and although we saw that Soligo has some really nice ultimates, which yet again huge shout out to him too, who's actually playing really well in this game as well, and had some really nice ults. But if he's not able to get there, if his stream of shuffles can't shuffle any card or aces on the top of the deck for them, then suddenly all you're left with is the deck of cards, which every time we look at it and think, well, these aren't ultimate no use to me though. So I still want to see from Dignitas a little bit of change, a little bit of mix-up, because Immortals are doing such a good job of responding to everything they're bringing out.
And I'm wondering if that response is just going to continue, because Immortals in the last 2 games, they felt so decisive in game 2, and on game 3, it felt like more of a reactionary play. So is that just a continuing trend for Immortals? Should they be playing this reactionary, or should they go back to the proactivity we saw in game 2?
If Dignitas are going to keep blindly going for a lot of these plays, like we saw with the bot lane play, where Will just opts in to try and take a 1v3 before his team can really get there and back him up, then yeah, Immortals can play this reactive game. They work really well with it as well, because they're trying to force reactions from Dignitas given the composition they already have. What does a 1-3-1 comp really want you to do? It wants you to react to it so you can respond to those little miss macros that happen.
And those small little miss macros too ultimately end up being just large macros across the entire board, which, by the way, it did seem like at some of those fights that Dig, even though they won out of them, they couldn't get much out of it. Side lanes were ultimately not in their favor. Yeah. They couldn't push some towers. There was just so much left open, and then you have to go for these very dangerous Baron calls. You're thinking, yo, we just won a big fight. We have to do something. And Immortals, like I said before, always ready for the take, TP's in, and the fight goes on and on, where ultimately Dig, they run out of cooldowns, they have no ultimates, and they end up falling. So just that's another thing too, which I remember we praised Immortals for before, their side lane control and ability to at times really just stay ahead of the game, which is paying off in dividends.
So then I have to ask, what does Dignitas do to get back into this series? Because honestly, these last 2 games, they've been falling by the wayside to that side lane pressure that you were talking about. Is that the answer? Is you just put more to the side lanes, or do you just commit more to those attacks that were working so well in game 1?
For Dignitas, I really don't want to see the Gnar anymore. I do like it as a champion. I think it's fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I just don't think it works into Viper's matchup because it's not something that's going to stonewall him. With the Shen, what do you build first? He rushed right away with the Thorn Mail, with the Frozen Fist. With Gnar, you're going Divine Sunder, you're going Steric's Gauge, you're going these items that make you into a bruiser. But it's not helping him survive a lot of these team fights. Lorlo's getting blown up way too fast in these mid-game team fights, and that's something that Dignitas need to address.
Oh, that's the biggest thing about it too. Like you were mentioning, Immortals, we were talking about the response. They just waited out his Gnar bar. Every single time he goes in, like, they either just shuttle the sidelines or wait for him to probably just like put out one ultimate where they ultimately survive out of that fight. When they come out of it, they blow him up because when Lorlo is done is done with all that, he's super duper low and just can't get picked off. Like, although he does fantastic to Viper with a Gnar, like when you go into those team fights with Gnar being a small little tiny boy, only so much he can do and poke before he just gets taken out. The strong little blade-legged lady can ultimately chop him in half. As gruesome as that is the ultimate truth that we live in this Summer's Rift day today.
Well, you've certainly made Joshi a lot sadder because he was talking on the cast about how much he loved Gnar. But I agree. I think this was really just a weakness for Dignitas. They had the matchup, they had the counter pick available, and even though Renekk is banned, there's still so many other options. What do you think is probably the best thing for Lorlo going forward in the series?
I wouldn't mind seeing the Shen run back, and I also wouldn't mind seeing Ornn. Just these champions that enable team fights and don't necessarily fail lane, or just happy going neutral lane.
Yo, honestly, okay, look, I know I proposed a lot of different types of picks here, guys, and I want you to hear me out.
Sell me on it, man. Sell me on it.
Okay. Look. Urgot. No. I think look, Axon's cool. Urgot is my play. Look. I want you to understand it. Look, like, I think although his street fight may not be as strong as Gnar, a single isolation damage to be just that big beefy front line in the middle of that 5v5, and the ability to lock down, like, just say opponents from a faraway range. We were talking about how Keith is untouched. You know what can possibly touch Keith? That fear beyond death, which goes so extremely far, at least gets us slow. And if he's low enough, that is the insta-kill. That's your ADC gone. And suddenly you're fighting a 4v4. Things are turning up for you. Dignitas, I'm taking a 2v2. We're going to game 5. I'm sharing my vision. I hope you all can see that.
Not everyone could be a lore, bro. He's not in love with that champion.
Look, bro, I just want proponents for just a more diversified top lane champ pool, because I find it just makes things a little bit more interesting personally. But hey, that's my personal opinion though, because right now, look, I mean, I'm personally happy with where things are. Like, I predicted Immortals to win, and so far things are going just hunky-dory for me.
Hunky-dory might be a word to describe this series, but I mean, your read is good. This is still game 4, though, of a best of 5, and quite honestly, could still go either way. We're very close to Champ Select, and I feel like between Immortals Academy and Dignitas Academy, Immortals Academy have felt a lot stronger in this series today, but still more to come, and quite honestly, I'm excited to see what Tigress and Joshi have to say about it, because we're getting in right now.
Welcome back to the casting booth. I was about to say, Ravishing Ravish, that you're talking about winning a game 5 when you predicted it 3-1 for Immortals, but catching and standing by your guns there in the end. Joshi, this is crazy. A lot of people were backing the Dignitas horse going into this with good reason, and they have shown some strong moments. Go see game 1 for examples, but it's Immortals that are following through the momentum coming here into game number 4.
And I honestly really expected this to be close, right? I said to you earlier, I was looking back at their previous series, where it is currently 1-2 in favor of Immortals. Dignitas won in a very convincing fashion, and I was expecting them to win, but not by that much of a margin. And now we're getting to see Jensen Ghost that he feels like he's figured out Dignitas Academy and is already starting to turn it on its head. But I'm also very excited to see that we are staying on the same sides of the rift for 4 games straight. Everybody's sticking to their guns, except for Ravish.
Yeah. We've got our eyes on you, Ravish. But That being said, though, Dignitas, if they want to come through with a victory and push this to Silver Scrape's territory, and we know that they're on blue side, Joshi, do you think it comes down to something different that you want to see from the draft, or is it execution?
I feel like we've been playing back so much the same draft, like very similar from game 1, 2, and 3, that it really does come down to that execution difference, right? It really comes down to what fights you're actually taking, when you're taking them, and how you can actually come in with a cohesive game plan that everybody's on the same page. I feel like Dignitas were in the control of that game until they take one fight where they aren't on the same page. They have different ideas of how they want to play, and Immortals were just a little bit too forward with exactly how they wanted to play.
Yeah, and if we want to see Dignitas coming a bit more together and keeping on the same page with how they want to play, maybe a Rise coming off of the ban block and here as a first pick could be one way to build around that. We know that not just the mid laners in general, but Soligo specifically has had a lot of fun on this pick.
And it's also kind of an effective ban against the LeBlanc. A lot of people look at the LeBlanc and they'll just counterpick Rise into it. So the fact that he's willing to just blind this champion straight away already is pushing Pretty off the LeBlanc and pushes them to pick up the Orianna very early on in the draft. I'm a little bit surprised that this is the answer, but I wouldn't be that surprised if it's immediately followed up by Aphelios.
Yeah, this is a switch up definitely of how Immortals Academy have kicked off their drafts as well in the previous 3 games. They always prioritized getting the completion of that bot side, even when they did have to switch that support position. And it looks like it's going to be another Aphelios lock in here for Keith, keeping with that pick throughout the series.
Very strong themes once again, but this time we are mixing up a little bit. We are in uncharted territory for the first time, it feels like, in this entire series. And the big question then becomes, how do Dignitas want to play this with a Rise? The Varus is still available, and they do lock that in. So again, a very similar matchup to games 2 and 3. They have a very strong backline. The only question now is how do they protect it, and how do they get fights started for it? They have some crowd control, but nowhere near as overbearing as it was in game 3.
Yeah, and when zeroing in on some of these matchups, the bot lane matchup, for instance, with the Varus into the Aphelios, we saw some great ways of using chains to be able to lock him down, but it's the Viego that is an important note to be coming back for Dignitas. We saw Will take out the pick in game number 2, another one of those very team fight oriented, really scrap in there and be rewarded for all of your aggressive nature, but looking for a different result this time, Joshi, already with some of the assembling pieces around it changing.
And once again, we are seeing Camille going to Viper as the 3rd pick on the red side, and likely very similar bans now with the mid laner already picked up for Soligo. We're not going to see a Syndra as the 5th ban from Immortals. It'll probably be the Gnar once again. And very consistent style coming in for Immortals Academy in terms of what they are actually trying to do. This time, though, it feels a little bit more difficult for Will to actually find some of these resets because you don't have Viper, Anda, and Pretty all jumping in. At least Pretty is going to be standing a little bit farther back so they can actually support the Aphelios and only really need to use the Shockwave in order to create these big moments for the rest of Immortals.
Find a way to get into that back line there. For Immortals, though, they're continuing to focus on that top side ban, taking out the Fiora this time alongside the Renekton. Renekton's been pretty consistent throughout, but with Lorlo not exactly showing his cards yet, they really want to make sure that Viper feels very comfortable in this matchup, it seems.
It feels like they are really trying to push Joey onto playing like the Nautilus once again, or maybe the Rakan. Rakan oftentimes pretty decent into Braum, but they want to make sure that they have some kind of dive buddy for Viper. Rakan is currently the number 1, and we said last time that Leona is kind of the go-to counterpick for a lot of teams. We've also been seeing JJ play a lot of Alistar.
Yeah, and they're the ones that banned away the Braum this time, too. It's not Immortals banning it against them. So instead, Leona coming out for Dig Academy.
Your
just
bae.
somebody who's, yeah, my
And
bae
my bae.
coming through. Yeah, oh, look, they did it just for us, Joshi. Yes. Oh, you got him at the ready there, too. I found
is
my
there.
Gnar back there. Oh, yeah, you can see him.
I see it. I see it. There we go.
He's
We're all ready
hanging
to
out.
go here.
Yeah, we are. And, I mean... I've been happy throughout the season because Leona's been very much at the center of the meta for good reason. You just have a lot of that CC, a lot of that ability to really go in and kind of follow up on in the bot lane 2v2 matchup as well. But here we go. Final lock-ins for these comps that we have here. And it's Dignitas Academy's last chance to make a fighting stance in this best of 5.
And I really like their composition as it currently stands, right? They have a lot of threats, they have a lot of crowd control, everybody has some way to get a fight started if they really need to, whereas Immortals, I like their composition. It's very standard in a lot of ways. You have a very clear front line, Trundle going to be primary tank, and both Camille and Rakonking kind of off tank, but they do it in such a way that is a little bit healthier, and they're hoping not to get blown up immediately. And it will really come down to, once again, how effective Will is going to be on this Viego. The last time we saw it was not super exciting, but this time he has a lot of ways. He has multiple champions that he can actually hit. He just needs to find those resets.
If you can follow up on a great Gnarl or that collabed some way with the Solar Flare from the Leona, there's just a lot of opportunity for that lockdown. We've also seen some pretty cheeky Realm Warp plays. I believe it was the previous matchup between these two teams in the early round of Proving Grounds, where there were sometimes some 5-man ults being taken. But I think that was on Immortals Academy. Why am I trying to think back that long ago, Joshi?
So
when so many
ago.
games. Yeah, it's so long ago. There were fun times with Rise. That is the point that I am trying to get at. And with as fun as this series has been, I'm definitely down for it.
I feel like every single time we see a 5-man Rise ult, if it's going to be anywhere near the enemy champions, it tends to go wrong. And my favorite story about this is Raya Afik, the guy who actually taught me how to play Gnar years and years ago, always says, as a playtester, whenever somebody would use a Rise ult aggressively, they tried over and over and over to find it, and every single time they would do it, they would consistently get blown up. And so, going up against an Orianna, you don't want to be like the playtest. You always got to find a new way.
And Orianna and Rise, a matchup we have seen consistently throughout this season. Just always some standard mages for the mid laners to play, with those coming back into the meta more and more, a bit farther from kind of that AD renaissance that we had for some time. No full team invades at the start of this game, though, when you compare them to some of the past.
But it doesn't mean that we're not out of the woods yet for a potential spicy early game, right? Remember, game 1, Ando went from red buff to bottom lane after starting the top side of the map. He's also been doing a lot of leashless starts. He's just been kind of doing his own thing, trying to set up opportunities for the rest of the team. And I think it was Armeo, Team Liquid's Armeo, who was saying that you can really give up a lot on Trundle early game, because he's just kind of this ball of stats. You just need to have your Q and your pillar, and then you can start looking for a lot of these early game plays, so you can skip over a lot of camps for some of these cheesy early plays. And once again, starting without a leash, but also is completely unknown as to exactly where he is, and it looks like Dignitas on the top side.
Ooh, JJ is starting with his Zenith Blade so that he can go in for some poke here. Continued cycle that you will see Leona want to do coming through. But yeah, that jungle matchup is where I am most interested in, because of the fact that Anda on this Trundle can really impact and be a bit more secure. Oh, going in again. Keith finding himself the subject of an early ignite from the support.
Very aggressive play coming in from JJ, and it is pretty exciting, but it also means you saw a lot of pings coming out from Dignitas towards the top side, towards Anda's red buff, and they're trying to figure out exactly where he is. And last time, they got to be ready. This might be an opportunity where Anda might be bot lane. They don't know. They don't have the vision. This is part of why they're now backing off. The window has largely closed, and at least become a lot more difficult for them to try and just go for these almost reckless early game plays.
And over on this bot side, stepping up, getting some of these wards down. Still just a lot of lack of information on both sides. And the way that he's been able to affect the early portions of this game, whether it comes with an early gank, as we noted in game number 1, but also securing some of these objectives. It was a bit disrupted during the previous game when Dignitas had prevented their dragon stacking. But Anda's been great at reading the map in general to find those opportunities for early Drakes, for early Rift Heralds. But here it's Jay going in with the Xenoblade. Will is here to follow up. Keep flashing out of this. Joey putting his body between his bot laner and the 3 members of Dignitas. Just expelling both of the Sems, or the summoners rather, from Keith here in the bot lane.
I've been paying a lot of attention to the way that Dignitas have been pinging in this early game. They pinged over towards the Grom because they thought that that's where Anda was. They then started pinging towards the Crab because that's where, if he's not bottom lane, he must be hitting the Crab already, right? So now a lot of Dignitas' early game plans, a lot of their early comms are like, oh crap, we were wrong about where Anda is this entire time. Now he's top lane and a beautiful pillar.
Great pillar to knock up Lorlo right beneath his feet. There's no semblance of
Beautiful.
escape. Even if he flashed out, it would have been way too dangerous. So Immortals first blood in the top lane.
And this all comes down to a single incorrect assumption Dignitas made at the very beginning of the game. They thought Trundle started on red buff. They thought he was doing the same thing as game one, but they were wrong. Anda mixing it up this time ends up getting his team first blood in the top half of the map and upsetting his top lane, where Viper has kind of struggled to find laning advantages up against Lorlo. Getting him this first blood this early on in the game, definitely going to be helping out Immortals to try and find another foothold in this game 4.
That shroud of mystery under the darkness of uncharted waters. And Dignitas, they want to make a return. Soligo and Will have stepped up, but it is warded. Anda is on the outskirts to get the return. Teleport coming in as well. Heat blasted on down. Will gets the kill credit. Soligo chunked on. Will, now he's all alone. Doesn't have a flash available. No semblance of escape. So Immortals come up with the kills in their stead.
Oh my gosh, Immortals are playing so well. Anda is playing so brilliantly this game. He mixed it up. He's able to take advantage of the wrong assumption and then immediately goes bot lane. Spawn and Viper trading their flashes.
Joey, just with a little more harass to follow up here, planning on a potential back in the end anyway, so okay with taking some of this poke, but a lot of action right at the start.
It is, and again, like, big props to Anda for being here immediately as this actually starts off. They end up finding a lot of time. They end up finding a couple of kills back. Soligo almost goes down to the turret shots as well because they know Gnar cannot be here. They know this is a play. As long as they are here, it turns the one opportunity Dignitas have to turn things around into a round, and Joey just goes for a dive.
Oh, just a continued follow-up of aggression from Immortals. Joey, good to survive, even though he takes some turret shots. Great on them to also not continue to go for this, so we'll have to back just to get some of that healing once again. Meanwhile, JJ already making his rotations across the map, potentially returning down here towards spot so that Spawn and JJ can push this in, but wanted to check on what's going down in the mid lane.
Yeah, okay, so something that we are paying attention to at the moment, or we have to turn our eyes towards rather, is the fact that, yes, Immortals have gotten a couple of kills, but they've also given up a lot of farm for it. Keith loses all that farm in the bottom lane because he was dove while there were about 2 minion waves crashing. Lorlo also able to get a big farm lead over Viper because Viper teleports out and allows Lorlo to crash multiple waves up into the top lane. So despite the fact that the kill lead is definitely in favor of Immortals, Viper actually going to be behind in experience at this point. Keith going to be behind in experience for a little while. Also vulnerable without any flash. So Immortals, you know, it is a great set of early game plays to come out, but they've given up quite a bit for it. That will be giving Dignitas an opportunity to potentially take some of these games, some of these fights later because they're closer than they might think they are.
And even while it's not the most damage onto these turrets, a little bit of chunking onto those plates on the top side. That bottom one, we saw how that wave was pushing in, but this is what we've seen from Anda before, using the opportunity of a little stillness in the water to go for the early Drake. The last one being around 640 during the last game, now at the 7-minute mark, hitting that first stack. And some rotations from Dignitas over on that bot side, but just to get some of the vision cleared.
Right, and we are starting to see more people move towards the bottom side, but crucially, Soligo going to be getting a little bit of vision as he backs in the opposing side of the rift. Should be pretty quiet for a little while, I imagine, right? There's nothing immediately on the map to fight for. In 30 seconds, there will be a rift roll that people can rotate up, but neither Joey nor JJ have currently left the bottom side of the lane. They're just going to be chilling out here, and Joey might be caught.
Always at the ready to follow through with the Zenith Blade, but we're still early enough. Can't follow up enough for Joey to not be able to escape, right? He had his friend by his side so he could jump to. And it's still that killer instinct, that killer mind that you want to see from Dignitas. JJ being on the Leona, you're the one that's looking to set up these plays for the rest of the team, and something that he can bring to hopefully even things out for them later. But, I mean, those CS leads still working in the favor of Spawn, still working in the favor of Lorlo, as as we reach that kind of moment of stillness. And that Rift Herald is up too. Hasn't been grabbed by anybody just yet. And Anda's rotated towards this top side. Control ward here will catch him out. So Lorlo has that information available to him. And Will's on the rotation as well. Might get a skirmish coming up.
Definitely opportunities for both teams to take a fight, but I don't feel like either team is super excited about a fight right now, right? Like, Rise does surprising damage with no items, but that's kind of all he brings, whereas Pretty, only having the Mercury treads available, doesn't actually bring a whole lot of damage. He's got an ultimate, and that's about it. And notice, neither support, neither AD carry is currently roamed up, but Spawn and JJ gonna be first to the punch. They can potentially get here before Keith and Joey, and it looks to be enough to convince Viper, Pretty, and Panda to be backing away, but we might be finding a pick on the other side as they're collapsing on Leona. Just gonna let him go.
Good on Dignitas to make sure to veer their direction into the safety of their jungle, because you could see that decision made by Immortals. We can't take this Rift Herald. Maybe we can catch the bot lane out on their rotation, but nothing to be had there. So this is a Rift Herald into the hands of Will for him to throw down at will in some point in time. And Immortals just going back to their lanes and getting that farming under their belts.
Should be, again, another moment of pause, right, while we wait for the team fight time to tick up. It was the Rift Herald, but nothing came of that. Now, we're looking at the next dragon. Immortals already have the first one, and while they might not know it, they do technically have a gold lead at the moment. So they should be feeling pretty decent about trying to take this fight with a bunch of people still on components. I'm going to be recalling both Joey and Keith, and a big thing that we got to pay attention to is we said last time that there's oftentimes a level difference between the AD carries and the supports. This time, Joey and Keith have the same amount of experience. We're not rotating Joey out of the lane nearly as often, whereas JJ is only level 5 while Spawn is a full level 7.
The consequence of that roaming. Viper always wanting to poke as much as possible here in the top lane, but we've definitely seen a larger slowdown in this game compared to some of the last, whether it is because it's not both of the supports roaming across. JJ wasn't able to find a lot when he was making those rotations, so returning back to make sure that Spawn is in a comfortable position, really lean into that CS lead that he has been gaining for himself on that bot side, and it's been pretty standard matchups through and through. Lorlo comes in with a Gnar ultimate though, follows up with a Q, decent amount of damage. Passive comes in for Viper though, has the hook shot to escape, doesn't have to blow any sums or an ultimate. But just timing up that rage bar to have as much of an impact. Throws out the ultimate from Spawn. Doesn't quite land though. Joey and Keith still safely here in the bot lane.
Yeah, pretty standard stuff coming in from Lorlo there. Poke ultimate's very common on Gnar because it's such a short cooldown on your ultimate. So Viper is going to be a little bit down in HP, whereas Lorlo's still very healthy. And both of them still have their teleports available. Lorlo, again, gotta pay attention to how much rage he has for all these fights when he can participate in them. Will be able to hold on to the appropriate amount of rage to have it ready for an upcoming fight around the Dragon, whereas Viper still needs to back away, might have a full Divine Sunderer if he wants to back and actually come to this Dragon fight. Hasn't yet committed to doing so because he knows Lorlo, as a manless champion, doesn't need to take any of these backs.
15 or 10 rather seconds on that dragon clock too, and that's what makes a great Rift Herald timing. Throw it into the mid lane before the dragon spawns so you can try and offer some of this pressure. Nelly gets the crash into the turret. Will forward, blocked off by the pillar, takes too much, goes over the wall. Solar flare from JJ here for some of the disengage, even gets out a flash here from Pretty, who has to back off of that. And now Dignitas, what are they going to do with what they just threw down?
Okay, well, they did get Pretty's ultimate, which I think is a bit more than they maybe ought to have been able to pick up, but they're also giving some space around the top turret. They're giving some opportunity for Lolo to hit the turret, and it does mean that Immortals currently uncontested on the bottom side of the map, and in the Smelling Weakness is going to be coming in and grabbing the second dragon of the game over here for Immortals. So it is, again, a trade of gold on the top half of the map, going over to Dignitas for these dragons that Immortals are picking up, and the gold lead is narrow enough that it doesn't automatically mean that Dignitas Academy will have the freedom to just contest Dragon 3, Dragon 4, and the rest of the game. So I think this game is probably our closest so far, partly because it's been the slowest, right? After the early game explosions, we haven't necessarily been seeing a lot of fighting.
different types of advantages that are difficult to read how they will impact later on. Dignitas pushing into these turrets. You can see a single plate standing on that top turret. It was the mid one where the Rift Herald was dropped to afford some of that as well. Whereas Immortals, on the other hand, stacking these dragons, they have a mountain that'll be the third, and it will be a mountain soul eventually. But very different win conditions that both of these teams are executing upon, and really setting themselves up to trust these hands when they get into some skirmishes later.
Oh, here's Joey.
Pulling in Soligo with the ultimate. Joey flashes in, goes for the knockup, a stun onto Pretty, but Joey is here for the additional shielding as well. It's just JJ. And get under the tower. Pillar flashes, but Viper just comes out of the jungle and ends his life anyway.
Free kill going over to Viper there. Just a good rotation, more people there. Dignitas weren't really ready to react to it, but it should be this top lane turret, if not going down outright, going down very shortly. Viper trying to come up, and after 450 gold, going over to Lorlo. We'll see if he can get out. Viper does not want to take a fight while the bar is there, and you do see him backing away. So, again, Lorlo currently being a point of power for Dignitas, consistently winning these lanes as should be expected, given the champion matchup that they have been opting into. But with two dragons going over to Immortals, it's the classic counterplay. Gold versus dragons, gold versus dragons. Dignitas currently with the gold, but need to be able to crack open this turret before the next dragon entry spawns.
And still fairly tight in that gold as well. And if you're looking towards Immortals, they have their mythics across everyone except for the support. Dignitas still waiting for Soligo to have his chance back and get that finished off for himself. And Spawn opting in for the Youmuu's here right at the start. So, I mean, this is going to get pretty spicy because Dignitas are continuing to pressure those turrets that they have been setting up throughout. This is their reward for sticking in the lanes and getting that farm, even though they had some of that support roaming. The rest of them have been here. Viper goes in with the hook shot, even flashes forward, attaches himself to Soligo, who activates the realm, but then ends up stepping on out of it because Lorlo was here to have that TP create the space, was wary about Viper going and following suit. But Joey and Anda and the rest of the Immortal squad have come over here towards this bot side to collapse if need be. But the entirety of Dignitas is here as well. And now Immortals peeling off of this to return to lane.
Very bold play coming through from Viper, considering that they haven't seen most members of Dignitas recently, but crucially, since everyone on Dignitas was bottom, it gives opportunities in the mid lane for Immortals to just hit this structure, and Spawn will be able to clear out a lot of the minions, but it's still a good chunk to take it out, and as the chain of corruption goes through, we gotta fight.
Yeah, follows it onto Joey, but Joey just stitches it back onto JJ. A step forward and a step into the dirt. Soligo flashes out. Viper throws down the Hextech ultimatum onto Will. Catches him in there. Spawn tries to poke over from the outskirts. Will flashes to safety. And Dignitas just ready to walk away from this after losing their support in the mid lane.
Their bottom lane turret also goes down. Loro continuing to get this structure damage, getting the structure gold. This should mean that the mid lane turret is going to get traded by the side of Immortal. They try and clear it out, but Spawn barely not able to clear it the last minion. So we are continuing to get this gold lead staying bang on even. Yeah, both these teams looking so close at the moment because they're constantly trading across the map.
There's a lot on the line, everyone. Remember, this is lower bracket, so you do often see, like we did in the earlier portions of the game, a bit more of that timidness, a bit more of that reason to stay in lane from Dignitas. It's because you are one game away from defeat, and you don't want to be caught in a position where you make any missteps. So they're trying to find their advantages where they are. They get Lorlo in that split pushing position. But on the side of IMT, you're trying to ride this momentum and close out the series here in game 4 before pushing it to game 5. So what a better way. I don't think there is a better way to really emphasize how important this matchup is, with the gold being as dead even as it has been.
We'll see. 40 seconds. We'll see if the gold that Dignitas have been going for is going to be enough for them to actually win this fight. We are starting to see Pretty get a lot more AP, getting a needlessly large rod, building towards the Seraphs. It is a really large AP stick coming up very shortly. But we're also seeing one of the crucial interactions that we haven't yet touched on. Trundle and Leona. Whenever Leona presses W and Trundle steals it, it can easily put Leona into the negative in terms of how much armor and MR they actually have, and suddenly this Leona becomes a lot squishy. But Viper, we're not gonna find it.
Throws the ball in onto Lorlo, ends up flashing out, and there's the Hextech ultimatum on again, and then the Solar Flare actually in response from JJ. He tries to get out of this, but they've lost their top laner. They have lost their jungler. Ooh. Viper slings on in and gets the last shot onto JJ. It's 3 loss for Dignitas. Immortals will be able to claim soul points.
Wow, I didn't think we were going to see anything after Viper actually misses the ultimate, but he's confident. He has Pretty behind him. He has a lot of damage to follow up, and there's a lot of crowd control too. So Immortals just able to take that fight. They're ready to go for it. It didn't feel like Dignitas were on an opportunity to actually try and react to it. So just look at how aggressive he goes, right? They just go in, they find the two-man shockwave, and JJ, I mean, he becomes so squishy at this point after the ultimate comes through, and neither Saligo nor Spawn have the damage to respond to anything. And of course, it doesn't matter if you have a lot of armor and MR. True damage just ignores all of that. So easy couple of kills. Immortals firmly in the driver's seat at this point, even though they don't have much of a gold lead, but they also need to push the tempo a little bit, right? The Saligo rise will become incredibly scary later on, and if they can afford to stand and hit like we saw glimpses of during this fight, it can very easily become a Dignitas victory.
Oh, might get another skirmish here though. TP coming through mid. Viper a long hook shot. Ushers the flash from Spawn, throws out a Q for some additional poke, but no vision established in this jungle, so Immortals shouldn't pursue this without that. They feel pretty good, but yeah, in terms of what Immortals in the previous fight and just what we have seen, where yes, Viper's willing to press that go button, but then Joey always keeping the quickness at the ready too. Even if one of the other ultimates doesn't hit exactly, it's just enough pressure and enough excitement for him to follow up with the charm of his own, and then the damage to follow through from Immortals. So Dignitas have to be wary about that, but still dead even in gold here. I love it so much.
We'll see how effective they can be. Now, I do gotta give praise to Pretty for his last ultimate, but we also gotta pay attention that he's had a couple misses at this point on the shockwave, and you know, he's still doing quite well, 3-0-4, but we need to make sure that's a tool that they are able to effectively use, and they are currently getting sieged in the vault lane by all these range champions. Lorlo trying to build up a rage bar in the turret, going low.
Solar Flare gets the direct stun onto Viper, and he's taken out. What can Immortals try to make of this? They do still have that turret up to dish out some of that damage back, but Dignitas, they take the single kill, and they're happy with it thus far, so they retreat into the lane.
Interesting fight. I mean, once again, we're looking at Will. How can he find these resets? How can he continue to take these fights? They found a good pick there onto Viper, but Pretty wasn't there, which means that it's still a question as to which team is going to be coming out ahead in the full-on 5v5s. Joey, suspecting a lot of people of fact, looking to find some stragglers. Oh, they do find one!
Oh, the knockup, JJ. He's in the cove. He's out in the lane, but it's still a disdain that he holds for Dignitas' bot lane. They continue through. They secure it, but in the jungle, Will finds himself on the opposite side of and Pretty. Lorlo makes the rotation over to support if needed, but no additional kills will be taken. Dignitas a bit more vulnerable without their supports.
Immortal is going to be using this opportunity as well of JJ being off the map, Will being forced back. They should be able to pick up this bottom lane turret if they commit to it. They're trying to buy space, and Lorlo not willing to walk up because he doesn't know exactly where the members of Immortals are. So this turret going down, actually really important. Oh, they think they know where Lorlo is.
Oh, and they directly hop on top of him. The pillar once again used to crush him. He tries to respond as quickly as he can, but Pretty gets the kill credit. A small wave here for Immortals to continue on to this turret. The turrets that have been focused by Dig, now it's their focus on Baron that they're looking to trade. They have been this whole entire time trying to trade objectives whenever Immortals pressures them in between fights elsewhere. JJ making his way towards the Baron itself, but Viper has already arrived. They have the control in the middle of the pit to go and offset the enemy vision. He swings on in. Solar Flare as a response. Baron does go in favor of Dignitas, but the fight continues. Viper and Joey directly into the middle of the pit. They kill both the top laner and the bot laner, both gone on Dignitas' side.
Big heads-up play from Dignitas to pick up the Baron. Immortals were way too far. It takes like 30 seconds to get from the bottom lane to the Baron if you are going to be running in this straight shot, and it's a situation where Dignitas know even with 3 members, they are fast enough to actually pick it up. And importantly, with the Rise, they're able to get most of their members out of that fight alive as well. A lot of teams without their Rise end up losing all of their members in the fight immediately afterwards. But now, Gabby, we're coming to the crux of the game. One team has the Baron, so it's not on the table, but the other team is threatening to pick up the Mountain Soul, get all the extra resistances, get the extra shield, and make it so difficult for people like Virus to try and poke, because every single time your Q is up, their opponents get a new shield to try and block it. So Joey trying to create space. They want to force Dignitas to face check into them. They also got to pay attention to what kind of bar Lorlo has. Lorlo can get a bar whenever he wants.
Immortals want this dragon so badly to be able to secure the soul, but they know how tempered they have to be when those Baron buffs are still on 3 members of Dignitas, rotating as a team to get that vision deep into enemy jungle territory. Will just poking right here on the outskirts. Vision somewhat secured in this river alongside the side brushes. Going forward, Solar Flare gets the stun onto 1. Keith backs up out of it. The hop over from Lorlo stuns 3 of the members, but is the follow up there? JJ knocked down to a blast at a minimum as his health bar is brought down to 0. It's a 2-for-2 trade thus far. Will trying to answer. Joey already into stasis, has to back out of it. Anda wanting to trade a life for his own, takes down the enemy jungler, but both junglers are gone at this time. It's a 3-for-3 trade. Can anyone make any quick work past that, though? Everybody else just has to disperse at this point in time. Dragon still being up. A lot of damage that Spawn can dish out to try and execute this. And with that, Joey and the rest just want to back off.
At another crucial time, unfortunately, Keith getting caught out by these ultimates, and it just allows the rest of Immortals to not having enough time to actually do anything. The fact that he gets caught here and everybody on Immortals has to turn to try and keep him alive just means that there's a whole panic in the ranks of Immortals, and Soligo and Spawn this entire time get to free hit. So just a small overstep, the fact that Keith walks a little bit too far forward suddenly puts this game in a spot where Dignitas have some more control, but the gold, Gabby, again, dead even after that fight. 41.5, 41.5 for both teams, but more time is bought for Dignitas to try and scale.
Oh, it's so crazy. Just as crazy as Viper is every time he goes in with the hook shot. The Solar Flare in response.
Nice.
JJ knocked down low. Another Gnar ultimate here from Lorlo to kick it off. Hops right onto Anda. The root is good. And Viper was the only one to fall in that, but Dignitas feel good about it.
Okay, Immortals are starting to feel a little bit too much, right? They're starting to look for opportunities to fight before they can actually establish battle lines. Pretty was not there for the fight, but he is 5-1-7. He's got so much of this team's gold at this point in the game. The highest farm, most kills. He's looking for opportunities to try and impact these fights, but he can't do that if he's not there. And that's Immortals opting into a fight once again. So the game still hangs in the balance. Soligo has more time to farm, more time to get more damage for these later fights, and Immortals, they are the ones who still have to push the tempo. They're the ones who are going to need to dive at some point, and Immortals need to find a fight.
Oh, this game is so close, and every pick can make the difference, which is why Will wants to go for it when he catches Joey, but then the rest of the Immortals team are on his tail, so he has to join Spawn right back over here in the mid lane. A nice separation and disengage from what could have been pretty dicey.
Oh, Viper teleported for this. Didn't even realize that, but he is currently here. They currently see Soligo up in the top lane. Are they going to try and force something? There's no dragon just quite yet. There's no waves to push for him. They don't realize this, but they're backing on a ward.
And that's going to be the price that they pay, because Dignitas noticing that just want to stop their backs as much as possible, because Soligo is able to complete the destruction of that turret in the top side. It's still only 1 turret above compared to what Immortals has taken, but with that map pressure, they were able to keep things even early on. And this is just getting really tight.
It's so tight right now. Everything really starting to hang in the balance. People are starting to get 2-3 items coming out across the board, and notice Keith also having to go with the Lord Doms as a second item, because he just needs to kill a bunch of tanky members. He has to chop through JJ, he has to get through Lorlo, who, even though he doesn't have any dedicated tank items, both Divine Sunder and the Sterix Gauge give him a lot of extra health anyway. The extra little bit that Lord Doms will do will allow him to actually go for some of these fights, but he also needs to be positioning nearly perfectly. He cannot allow Will and Soligo to just free hit against him. He cannot position super far forward. He's got a tank line. He needs to be able to play behind it.
Both of the teams just want to be the first to clear out the jungle, to get themselves in that position, to catch out one of the enemy, because that Baron is spawning in about 30 seconds right now, and while it's not necessarily something that's immediately drawing the attention, we've seen both of the teams just rotate towards these major objectives to try to get these fights. Viper going in continuously, JJ always there at the ready to zip in if need be.
And it takes a big chunk. He's got the Anathemas. Curious on who it's actually placed on at this point. Lots of realistic targets, but we also see, again, Immortals not picking a lot of poke, not picking a lot of wave clear, which means that they're the ones who have to go for a fight. They can't just line up and siege up against the members of Dignitas. And Dignitas now control the chokes. They are now preventing Immortals from just walking over. They find a route.
Oh, Moonlight Sigil thrown out. Pillar right there in the center. Dignitas a little disrupted,
Ooh,
but
nice.
Immortals are now the ones just out here rotating from the mid lane. Dignitas, they go towards the Baron. They do start this up slightly. They have the scuttle in their favor. They drop down a control into that pixeled rush.
Whoa, this is
And the
scary.
Realm Warp brings Lorlo to them, gets an ult onto one member, followed up with a solar flare, goes into stasis as the pursuit is good. The shutdown onto Joey. That kill credit goes over to Will, but they have lost the top laner of their own. Well, they continue on to this. A little bit of poke onto Anda, but he's a beefy boy at this point. Viper going and escaping, and Dignitas pinging back over towards this riverside.
This is why mid-prior is so important. It allows you to have extra options. They are able to pick up the mid lane turret. We also have a dragon spawning very soon, but now no top laner available. He will have teleport in 25 seconds, and Immortals, they want to find a fight before Lorlo is able to come back, because he will be here before Joey. But look at this. Dignitas don't even need to be hitting the Baron. They just need to keep Immortals around so that Lorlo can get back.
And it's so hard for them to be able to step up here because of the way this warding is going, and just circling right around the back of the pit. There's a shockwave available for Pretty if he can get in range, but it's a very difficult thing for him to do right now with the poke.
Teleport mid.
Are they going to make a play for it? Viper goes in, gets stunned up in the process. Soligo flashing out. Oh, that's quite the burn down onto Viper. Dignitas, can they escape here? They lose JJ. Will trying to go in with the execute. Gets executed himself. Lorlo, full HP, but not so much anymore. Knocked up by the pillar. And that's just two standing in Soligo and Spawn here against Immortals, but no one is strong enough to be able to go and stick back onto this objective.
But the other objective is up, Gabby. We got the Mountain Dragon coming through. That's Mountain Soul that's going to be going over to Immortals after this crazy back and forth fight once again. We saw Pretty finally finding a shockwave. Watch how they're actually able to find something in this fight. And it's not the whole thing they wanted, but they're able to keep themselves alive. And Keith having a great gun. He's got the red gun to keep himself alive as people are able to come in. But look at this. The shockwave ends up landing on Sligo, but somehow it looks like it's a little bit too early to land onto everybody else. But Will able to get the reset, trying to go back in, and Keith, as long as he's got this red gun, he's going to be able to keep himself alive. He's got enough lifesteal, and so even though Lorlo goes in and ends up finding him at the end, he has to overextend in order to actually make it happen. So Immortals, even though they don't pick up the Baron, even though we have to get another fight over the Baron once again, Immortals will be able to do it with a Mountain Soul. They're suddenly way tankier than they were in the previous fight, and they technically have a gold lead.
Finally, a little bit more of a lead, though I was enjoying how close it was for some time. But that soul was the true prize of that fight around that Baron side. That was the only major objective up for some time being. But then Immortals, in the end, being able to trade pretty much equal amount of kills, go and now have this that's going to make it a lot easier for them to push through against the Dignitas squad that were looking pretty aggressive for some time, but have had some difficulty getting picked out with. I mean, JJ's been targeted and just burned down really early in a lot of these cases, being targeted by someone like Anda, who can really nullify the tankiness that he brings through. So, Joshi, if you're looking at Dignitas right now, how you feeling?
I'm feeling okay, right? Like, we've seen a couple of good moments from them, and it really comes down at this point to individual execution. We've seen them go for fights where Lolo had a bar, where he was able to get a big ultimate, where he was able to impact the game. But we've also seen fights where they just unfortunately throw Lorlo in and JJ into their death. So it really comes down to how well they're able to follow up anything that their frontline is actually able to do. Soligo and Spawn do a ton of damage at this point in the game. They're able to burst out a lot of these members. They have the Serpent's Fang to really reduce Keith's actual ability to stay alive in these fights without the Mountain Soul, without the Immortal Shield Bow, without the Red Gun Shield that he's able to pick up at certain different points. But they actually have to be on the same page. They were great at it in Game 1, kind of gave up on it in Game 3, and now it's potentially what they need to do in order to stay in Proving Grounds.
Can they pull it off, though? That is the question. For Immortals, they've got all of their ultimates up on both sides. 2 TPs available for Immortals, 1 for Dignitas. Always important to consider when you're looking at how some of this is going, with Viper being so far extended away, but can still get to the fight as quickly as they need him to. But later on in the game, right, if you have Spawn, if you have Soligo that can really dump out that damage and you get just one advantageous team fight, one good pick, it could be what turns the tide when there's a 1.5k gold lead for Immortals that can be squenched with a good play.
We also got to pay attention right now, Gabby. Where are those picks likely to come up? Keith has his flash available, but Soligo does not. And then Viper do not. Lorlo does not. Lorlo doesn't have a bar. I don't know if Immortals know that, but they're going to be the ones who are hitting. They do this very quickly, but Dignitas are already on the scene.
They've started this. The Solar Flare has already been used and unfortunately couldn't get a stun nor slow. Soligo used his teleport to get in here. And Immortals have effectively peeled off the Baron. Pillar to start this fight. Viper is in pursuit. Lorlo hopping away, but Viper over the wall. Hextech ultimatum onto Spawn, but his life is the one sacrificed before anything else can happen. Will, with the execute, goes over the wall, but no, he falls. Immortals, they're onto the tail of JJ. They're onto the tail of Spawn. Spawn, is this the dawn of a new day for you and the rest of Dignitas? It is hard to say when you have 4 angry Immortals faces right against yours.
I did not expect the game to just end like this. I feel like we had this exact same thing happen earlier. Viper's like, oh, I guess we're fighting now. And he's just able to finally engage. It wasn't the prettiest thing ever, but they are able to find the fight. They can't allow Spawn and Soligo to hit, and Spawn last one to die.
Viper and actually Joey goes down there, but it's okay for Immortals. They know what they're dealing with. They take down the final member of Dignitas and set their eyes on this Nexus turret. Immortals, true to their name, toss aside the black and yellow, staying alive in LCS proving grounds and proving the rest of them wrong here today. What a series we have had, my friends. It's been a pleasure from myself and Joshi. We are going to kick it to a break, and on the other side, the analyst desk has you covered.
And welcome back to the Super Desk. Oh my goodness, the series between Immortals Academy and Dignitas Academy. Someone here on this desk was right, and it had to be Ravish.
Yes, indeed, my friends, and I think there's only one main thing I could just get off to you all is, haha and ha. It's just, yet again, I prove myself to be the superior analyst as I know that I am, but sincerity though, massive shout out to Dig, though I know we've been talking about how phenomenal they've been this entire split. Out of many people were underestimating them, but like I could just past TLs like loss that they had, like they played phenomenally, and this team with this roster still looks so gosh darn good even in this game. But big shout out to Immortals.
And the way the Immortals were able to play this, especially early game, you had Anda focusing the top side early, the counter matchup, the Gnar into the Camille. It's already been so good for Viper in these mid games when he's able to get there. What if he has a good early game? That's not to take away from Lorlo, though. As you can see in this clip right here, Lorlo was actually able to get some really, really solid Gnar ultimates, something we've been dying to see from him from the entirety of this series. And this would enable resets from Dignitas. This would enable Dignitas to stay in the gold lead for a strong majority of this game, despite Immortals winning a lot of these fights.
Was very close, and throughout the game, honestly, we were convinced that this was going to be a barn burner, like a 45-minute game where neither team can find an advantage. But then Immortals Academy just find a way to get these fights, and Dignitas Academy didn't have the engage they needed on these Gnar teleport plays.
It felt like Anda was everywhere this game. Taking a look at him and Viper together were dive buddies. You know, Joshi kept talking about it on the casting this. You know, you got to have your buddy with you. Seeing them go so deep, going for every single member they could, and Dignitas just could not get the damage output to deal with what Immortals were able to bring to the late game, because this has been Immortals' MO. This is the way they play. They have an early game, someone to depend on there, a mid game, someone to depend on there, and a late game is all going to be Keith with that Aphelios and being able to carry, being able to bring that DPS. All about getting them to that late stage. It can be rough to get them to that late stage, but they did it consistently in these last 3 games, and they were rewarded with a hell of a marksman to output DPS at the very end of those matches.
And even in the early stage Deathstrokes, you saw, like, although later team fights were phenomenal from them, but early game, their dragon control was really well done too. How you stack them, made sure they had one consistent win condition at all times. And yeah, when you go throughout the entire game, there's certain little dives, and you find that the hesitation to going from game 3 to game 4 was also removed from there. And then biggest note out of this time, the throw didn't happen at Baron, but unfortunately they just got outpaced by Immortals.
And it's got to feel so good for Viper and Anda in particular, because you got to remember, these are the guys who won the last Proving Grounds over on No Org in spring against Cloud9 Academy. Not showing up the way they wanted to. Now they're starting to find their groove, and now we're getting into these late stages with this deep run.
And hopefully they'll be able to continue this run, because they've been doing well so far. But I have a special event coming up for everyone involved. That's right, you the desk, you the audience, everyone. We've got the Verizon post-match interview featuring Pretty from the winning team Immortals Academy. Pretty, congratulations on your win. That must have been a tough one.
It was not as tough as I thought. No disrespect to enemy team, but after the first game, we figured like everything that they wanted to do, and we just made sure we adapt correctly, and that's why we won 3 games in a row. Yeah, it was very easy to read them. I think that gave us the upper hand.
You know, I think it actually was your coach Jensen who said in a tweet yesterday that he had this team on lockdown. So was that preparation something that was talked about a lot, or was it just the whole team had an idea on this team? You had the read before you talked about it.
We had a lot of info before we started the game or the series, which was like due to Jensen, like scouting and everything. So that helped us a lot. And also, I think the biggest thing when it comes to best of 5 is the first game is a game where you see a lot of things of like in terms of priors, how they want to play them up and everything. If they have priors on Drakes, for example, and all of that, because they can change between like days, because their last series was like 2 or 3 days ago. So after we realized what they wanted to do, they were not playing for Drakes. They were relying on getting early game leads. After the first game, we knew that if we get to the mid game with a stable early game, we're going to win the game. So we focused our draft on that, and I think it was fairly easy after that.
Honestly, it looked like you guys were playing pretty confidently, especially after that match 1. What do you think was the main hiccup that happened there? Because it felt like you guys just weren't on the same communication wavelength that we saw in the later games.
Yeah, maybe just first game of the day. We are not used to starting so early. Like we play every game at 5, and this was like at 3. But maybe it's like an excuse, but we just didn't start like the way we wanted to. But as we started warming up and getting more into the series, like getting the info, as I said, like adapting better to them, I think it was, just like one game of we needed to warm up, that's it.
Makes sense to me. I mean, honestly, that warm-up is super important, but I want to ask you about that adaptation. So as we went through the series, we saw you on Orianna. We also saw you on the LeBlanc. Where do you see yourself as a mid laner on this team? Do you find yourself the control mage player to play safe, or are you more of the assassin on Immortals Academy?
I think one of my biggest strengths individually is that I can adapt very well. So I can play different styles, and I know what I need to do for my team to win. Um, so it honestly always depends on drafts. Like we realized they were gonna blind pick Azir, and I have a free LeBlanc there, and if it's free, I'm gonna bust it, and we're gonna win the game. Everybody knows that in my team, they trust me. So when it comes like they pick Rise, and we know that we're just gonna like do some other things. But it's very easy because we have trust in each other, and they trust me with my picks, and I think I deliver as well. So good.
And that trust is awesome to hear because all of Immortals Academy have been playing so long. I feel like every series I watched throughout this tournament has gone the full distance, all 2-1s except for Zeus Gaming. How does that take a toll on the mentality among the team, knowing that you have to play so many games to get to where you are?
It's actually very good for us, or at least in my opinion, it's good to play a lot of games under high stress. That's something that we missed during last split, for example, and I think it's very important for teams to have that. Like game threes, game fives, or whatever, it builds up a lot of like trust between the team, and I think well, since we won them and we're not out of the tournament, we have so much more practice than other teams, and we have went through a lot more situations than other teams would. That's like just very good building on that as a team, trusting each other, and I think our teamwork has improved a lot because of that.
Oh, definitely. I definitely see a lot of improvement amongst the team. And now I have to ask, since we're moving forward into the tournament, your next opponent between Wildcard Red and Golden Guardians Academy, which are you looking at more, and which do you think will be a harder matchup for you?
I don't know which would be the harder matchup, honestly. They are a bit similar, or in my eyes, with how they play. So I don't mind wherever we play, honestly. I think that we have our own strengths, and during the tournament we developed like a lot as a team, and we're not afraid of anyone.
That's good to hear. So does that mean this is the final run, Immortals Academy going all the way in, and they're going to take Proving Grounds? Am I hearing it right now for the first time on this interview?
Yep. Yeah, Viper and Under are getting their second title.
All right. I love to hear it. I would love to see Immortals Academy do even better and push themselves to the top of the Proving Grounds. But Pretty, I want to thank you so much for this interview. It's been a lot of fun, and thank you for your insights.
Thank you very much.
Good stuff, and I love the confidence coming out of Pretty, the first Greek player coming into this region. So awesome stuff, guys. It's been a fun day.
It has been a fun day, and yeah, you gotta love it from Immortals and Pretty and the whole squad, just to see the journey that the squad has gone through. They did do the change up back in spring where they swapped the roster, getting Anda and Viper in, and they have been the performance that's booming. Top 6 finishes when it came down to it, improving from the bottom 9 that they had before, and now in Proving Grounds in the summer, they are in the top 4. So hats off to them for that performance right there. They definitely earned it.
And they just keep showing up opponent after team, and just like the way, like you mentioned, Destrux, they've evolved, they've changed, and they've grown. And I am honestly just genuinely impressed with what I've seen of our Immortals. And straight up, I cannot wait to see if they can like just go all the way. Maybe they might end up taking a second, maybe first, maybe they win this whole thing. Anything is possible. You know why? Because it's Proving Grounds.
Someone's got to prove something. That's the entire point of this tournament. And quite honestly, I'm excited to see what the bracket looks like right now, because it's been crazy. And now, knowing that Immortals Academy have taken this win, they will be facing off against the winner of tomorrow's series, Wildcard Red and Golden Guardians Academy.
And this is an exciting one because it is the last amateur squad that's still alive in this tournament. And this squad went far right from the get-go when it comes to Wildcard Red, because you look at what they did at the start, taking out 100 Thieves next, taking out Resolve, a team that looked great from the start, that was able to take down Cloud9 Academy. It is good for them thus far, only falling to 100 Thieves Academy, another super team when it comes to the Academy squads. They have a challenge ahead of them in Golden Guardians, who's been looking stronger and stronger as time has come. Let's see how they're able to bring it. Let's see if Academy can survive in Proving Grounds and make it to that finals once again.
And one thing Puri said too, which is super crucial, was that both these teams have a super similar playstyle, which I actually don't disagree with. Like, consider both of them like to scrap things up. Both of them have extremely strong laners, and both of them, are ready to go at each other at any time possible. And I find, like, with what we've seen between both these teams, with their superstar supports, their solid top laners, and really fun macro play to watch, I am sure that, like, tomorrow's matchup is going to be one that everybody at home watching will not want to miss.
Honestly, it's going to be a crazy matchup that we have tomorrow, which, again, Golden Guardians Academy versus Wildcard Red, another best of 5. We're doing nothing but best of 5s from here on out, folks. Proving Grounds, they got real.
Yeah, it did indeed. I mean, like, and by the way, I believe, if you miss us, it's like, don't worry about it. I think we're gonna be back tomorrow, so don't miss us too hard. We'll see you in maybe 12 hours.
Yeah, something like that. This Super Desk will ascend to Super Desk 2 tomorrow. Don't miss it at all. It will be right here, right then, 3 o'clock PST. We'll see you then. Good night.